Welcome to the show In the Clutch. I am your host, Draft Raw, and as of right now, the 2020 NFL Draft has just concluded. And so obviously, let's get through a recap. So in this 2020 NFL Draft, we had a lot of surprising picks. We've had picks that we knew were going to happen, and then there was some head scratchers of guys being picked maybe higher or lower than what we thought they were going to be picked. But it's the NFL Draft, and that's what usually happens anyway. So anyway, without further ado, let's go with the first pick. Cincinnati Bengals select quarterback Joe Burrow from LSU. Now, Joe, obviously, this was the consensus pick. Everybody knew that this was going to be the pick for them. They needed a quarterback. They went out and they got the quarterback. Do I think that they got the best quarterback in the draft? No, not really. I had Tua Tagovailoa as the best quarterback, but I will say this. This is a guy that he showed out in college his last year at LSU. He's hasn't been often injured like Tua has, so it carries a lot of why they would have picked him in the first round. Now, my whole thing is that I don't exactly agree that he's going to be a franchise-changing quarterback, but I do think that he's going to be a pretty solid quarterback in the NFL. If we look at the past over the years, quarterbacks that have been drafted with the first overall pick, more than likely, most of these guys have not panned out. Hopefully, this guy can pan out for the Cincinnati Bengals, but I am a Ravens fan, so I don't want him to pan out. But anyway, this was the pick. This was consensus. This was the guy that they wanted, and they got their guy. With the second pick, the Washington Redskins drafted Chase Young, defensive end from Ohio State. Now, Chase Young was also the consensus pick of this draft. Everybody knew that Chase Young, the consensus that he was going to be the second pick. He was the best player in the draft, the best pass rusher, wherever you want to call it, the next generational pass rusher that's going to be coming into the NFL. What I like about this pick for the Washington Redskins is that last year they chose Montez Sweat. They already have Ryan Kerrigan, and now they're bringing in another pass rusher. Ryan Kerrigan, who's getting older, he's a little bit longer in the tooth, so this is an opportunity for the Washington Redskins to get more pass rushers and to get another guy that can be explosive and be a big-time pass rusher for them, just like they have in Montez Sweat. It's pretty much is going to work out for them. They already have a good set of defensive linemen with Deron Payne and Jonathan Allen, and then like I said, Montez Sweat from last year, and now you add Chase Young. This should be a really, really fun defense for the Washington Redskins, especially with Ron Rivera coaching this team. So let's now go on to the third pick, and that's Detroit Lions, and they choose Jeff Okudah, cornerback from Ohio State. Now, this is back-to-back Ohio State defenders. Jeff Okudah, I felt, was the best corner in this draft. He may be the best Ohio State corner that I've seen, period. This was a consensus pick. Now, the surprising part was that we heard a little rumblings that they may trade down. And we heard maybe it would be Miami that would trade up to the third pick, or even the Chargers, the Los Angeles Chargers. But instead, they decided to keep their pick, and they decided to take who I actually have as the best player in this draft, and that's Jeff Okudah. I think he's the most cleanest player in this draft. I think that when it comes to man coverage, zone coverage, when he's pressing, his ball skills, everything, his tackling, everything that you look for in a corner, I think that this guy has. And that's why I have him as the best player, and the Detroit Lions just chose him. Now with the fourth pick, a guy that was, to me, being underrated in a lot of mock drafts, and that was Andrew Thomas, offensive tackle from Georgia, that got chosen fourth pick by the New York Giants. the reason why I felt like he was being greatly underrated is because they were a lot of mock drafts was putting guys like Mekhi Becton or Jedrick Wills, or definitely like a Tristan Wirfs going in that top 5. For whatever reason, Andrew Thomas' name never popped up for the top 5. Now, I'll say this. I felt as though Andrew Thomas was the best tackle in this draft, definitely the best left tackle in this draft, and is going to be a stalwart for the New York Giants and what they're going to put for the blind side for a guy like Daniel Jones. I really do like this pick, and I think that they've chosen a guy that I feel is a future Pro Bowler and a 10-year protector for Daniel Jones and the New York Giants, or whoever's going to play quarterback for the New York Giants. Now, with the 5th pick, this was a situation where in the beginning of the year, Miami Dolphins, they were talking about the tanking for Tua. Everybody thought that when they traded a bunch of players like Laramie Tunsil and Minkah Fitzpatrick, they felt as though, the Miami Dolphins were going to tank for Tua and get the number 1 overall pick so they can get Tua. Well, Tua gets hurt. The Bengals get the number 1 overall pick and they chose Burrow. The Miami Dolphins still get the player that everybody thought they were going to get, and that was Tua Tagovailoa. Now, there was rumblings that he may slide in the draft, but overall, what ended up happening is they stood their spot, they didn't trade up, and they said, you know what? If he's there, we're going to take him. If he's not, we're going to take an offensive tackle. And guess what? The way that the draft was going to fall, he was going to be there unless the Chargers or somebody decided to try to trade up. But I'm hearing also the Detroit Lions didn't want to trade back, which was also a rumor that kind of came out a little bit later while you were watching the draft. So now that the Miami Dolphins are on the board, they select their quarterback for the future, and were able to basically, to me, get the best quarterback and be able to maybe solidify their team for the next 10 years when you have a guy like Tua. Now, the biggest question mark is the injuries, and hopefully he stays healthy. But if he does stay healthy, you're going to have probably one of the better quarterbacks within the NFL within the next couple of years. Now, going to the 6th pick, the Los Angeles Chargers chose Justin Herbert. This was almost a little bit surprising. And the reason why it was a little bit surprising is because you would think that maybe the Chargers wouldn't go the route of quarterback. They said that they were going to keep with Tyrod Taylor and he was going to be their quarterback. But at the same time, in the back of your mind, you kind of knew that they still wanted to go out there and get a quarterback. You thought that maybe their guy was going to be Tua, but the whole time it was Justin Herbert. They wanted to get a better player than what they had at Phillip Rivers, a guy that Phillip Rivers wasn't known for his athleticism or strong arm, and this is what Justin Herbert is known for. And I actually like Justin Herbert, especially his skill set and what he can bring to the Los Angeles Chargers. I personally do like this pick, and I think that if you let him sit for a year, he can become a good quarterback within the NFL as well. After that, with the 7th pick, the Carolina Panthers decided to take Derrick Brown. Now, this was a surprising type of pick in a way. Derrick Brown is definitely one of the top 5 players in this league. Most people had him as the 2nd best player in this draft. But most people had Isaiah Simmons mocked to the Carolina Panthers and not Derrick Brown. But I think that overall they looked at it as if you take Isaiah Simmons, you're basically taking the same player that you got in Shaq Thompson. They already have Shaq Thompson, a guy that used to be a safety that now plays linebacker. And the same thing with Isaiah Simmons. You're getting a guy that's a safety that's now going to probably play linebacker within the NFL. It probably didn't make sense for them, so they decided to say, you know what, let's build on our defensive line, and let's take who basically is the 2nd best player in this draft, and that's Derrick Brown. And what they're going to get from him is a good run stuffer, and also he's going to be a solid pass rusher. Not going to be a great pass rusher, but a solid one. But the biggest thing is if you saw him this year, he made a lot of plays, a lot of forced fumbles, a lot of fumble recoveries, and even almost took some of them back for a touchdown. He didn't have the speed to get it into the end zone, but still, he was able to cause a turnover and create a big play for the Auburn Tigers. Next, we're going to talk about the Arizona Cardinals with the 8th pick, and they decide to actually take Isaiah Simmons, safety or linebacker from Clemson. Now, this is the weird thing about it. I Didn't expect that. And I don't think a lot of people expected Isaiah Simmons to go to the Arizona Cardinals. If he didn't go to the Carolina Panthers, you expect him maybe to drop just a little bit. Maybe he would go to the Jaguars, or maybe a team like the Browns would pick him up. But the Arizona Cardinals decided to choose him. It was a little bit weird because I felt as though with the Cardinals, they probably should have went offensive line, and instead they went to their defense. Maybe they addressed their offensive line day 2 of the draft. Maybe that's the case, what is going to come with them. But I think that the Arizona Cardinals saw an opportunity where they can take probably the best defender. Some people felt as though Isaiah Simmons was the best defender in the draft, and maybe with that chess piece, maybe they're taking the best defender or the best player that was on that board, period. It was a surprising pick, but to me, it was still a solid pick for them to try to improve their defense. With the 9th overall pick, this is probably the first real surprise in the draft. Now, a surprise to most people because if you look at mock drafts, this guy wasn't mocked there. But if you're hearing what was going around in the league, Jeff Okudah on some teams' board was the second best corner, and C.J. Henderson, who got drafted by the Jacksonville Jaguars 9th overall, was the number 1 corner. So I think Jacksonville saw this opportunity to take a guy that is pretty much from their home state and to take a guy that they felt was though the best cover corner in this draft. Now, personally, I'm not the biggest fan because he's not physical and he doesn't tackle, but still, he is one of the better cover corners in this draft, and this could work out for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Hopefully, this replaced what they lost in Jalen Ramsey. We'll see, but I think that they definitely still got a good player when it comes to a guy like a C.J. Henderson. With the 10th overall pick, the Cleveland Browns select Alabama offensive tackle Jedrick Wills Jr. Now, Jedrick is, to me, probably the most cleanest prospect in this draft. And when I say cleanest, he plays the right tackle position, so it's a little bit undervalued, but he has the athleticism and the potential to play left tackle, which is a high value type of position within the NFL. And when I say cleanest, not to say I've never seen, but there's not many guys that come out of college that in pass protection, they look so smooth. You don't see it a lot. He was one of the most smoothest pass protecting tackles within this draft. And to be honest with you, he could have been honestly the best tackle in this draft if it wasn't for Andrew Thomas, who I just value just a little bit more. But the Cleveland Browns, I think they're going to be looking at it as changing him to a left tackle because free agency, they grabbed up Jack Conklin, who's going to play that right tackle position. So now a guy at left tackle with Jedrick Wills, they get to solidify that offensive line and be able to try to protect Baker Mayfield for him to be able to get the ball to his extraordinary receivers like Odell Beckham Jr. or Jarvis Landry. Now with the 11th pick, this is a pick that I actually like as well because I felt as though I didn't know what to think about him before I watched his tape, but once I watched his tape, I was amazed. The New York Jets with the 11th pick selected Mekhi Becton, offensive tackle, Louisville. This guy may very well, when it's all said and done, become the best left tackle in this draft. Now, do I think that he's going to be better than Andrew Thomas? He has the potential to. When you're 6'7", 6'8", and you're about 360 pounds and you can move like him, there's no other tackles in the league that is his size and can move like him. And this is what makes him, or potentially to being one of the better offensive tackles in this draft. And for the Jets, it's a great pick because they get to solidify their offensive line a little bit more with a left tackle that can help protect a guy like Sam Darnold, who needs that protection. And maybe on the second day in the draft, they'll probably go and get a receiver. But right now, it's better for them to protect a guy like Sam Darnold. With the 12th pick, the Las Vegas Raiders select Henry Ruggs, wide receiver, Alabama. This was a surprising pick. Him being the first receiver taken in the draft, I couldn't believe it. You would have thought it would have been CeeDee Lamb. You would have thought it would have been Jerry Jeudy, his teammate at Alabama. But it ended up being Henry Ruggs. He's the speed demon. Mike Mayock, I do like Mike Mayock, so maybe he knows what what he's getting in this guy and what he wants, and John Gruden knows what he wants within his offense that he's building over there with the Raiders. So maybe it's a situation where they just said, we got Darren Waller, who's a fast tight end. Now we get one of the fastest receivers in the league that's going to be coming in the league, that's coming out of this draft. So maybe they have a big plan. I didn't expect this, but maybe they have a plan for him, and it can possibly work out, but I'm not the biggest fan of Henry Ruggs because I think that teams didn't challenge him with physicality. And I think in the NFL, if he gets challenged with some physicality for some corners that, like to play press, we don't know how he's going to react and if he's going to be a really good receiver. But I would just say this. If they have a plan for him, he can be a huge weapon for the Raiders and Derek Carr. But if it doesn't work out, this is probably one of the bigger draft busts that we've seen in recent years, especially for the the Las Vegas Raiders that have been known to kind of bust at these positions. Next was the first trade. And then this was crazy that the first trade, there was no trade in the top 10, and that usually doesn't happen. You at least get one or two. The first trade happened, and it was literally one team moving up one spot. And that was the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So I'm wondering if maybe it was the Denver Broncos that may have been challenging to probably move up, or maybe it was the Miami Dolphins who later on decided to take an offensive tackle. But the Tampa Bay Buccaneers decided to trade up one spot to take Tristan Wirth, offensive tackle / guard from Iowa. Now, here's my thing. I don't think he's an offensive tackle. But maybe in a situation with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, maybe he plays right tackle. Maybe that's a position that he can be comfortable at. That's what he played at Iowa. But to me, he's an offensive guard. I think that he's a Pro Bowl type of offensive guard, and I think he's an average or solid offensive tackle. To me, this is a pick that also is expected because you're getting a guy that's going to be able to protect Tom Brady, who's now the quarterback of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And this is something that, if he has all these weapons, he always needs some guys in front of him to be able to protect him so he can get the ball to guys like Mike Evans and Chris Godwin and now Rob Gronkowski that's been traded to the Buccaneers as well. So, honestly, I think this is a solid pick, but I'm not too gung-ho about this pick because I'm not too gung-ho about the player. But if you play him at guard, then we're talking. We're definitely talking. With the next pick, the 14th overall pick, the San Francisco 49ers, who traded back from 13, decide to choose Javon Kinlaw, defensive tackle, South Carolina. Now, Javon, I felt as though was a top 5 player in in the draft. Also, this is a little bit weird because they literally got rid of DeForest Buckner to basically select another defensive tackle. But I do understand it in a way. So, with the situation is that they got rid of a guy that they were paying $16 million to draft a guy that they're going to pay $5 million. And it's pretty much a player that's similar in terms of he's solid against the run and he's a great pass rusher. And that's what they got. That's what they had in DeForest Buckner. So they just kind of traded off the same player and using less money to have this player on their team. I thought they would have gone receiver at this point, but they do go receiver later in the draft. We'll get to it. But with this pick, I do like the pick because I do think that he's one of the better defensive tackles in this draft. And honestly, I think that he's a better defensive tackle than Derek Brown and one of the better players within this draft period. Now with the next pick, the Denver Broncos with the 15th overall pick select wide receiver Jerry Jeudy from Alabama. This was a situation where I think that they felt as though Henry Ruggs would be there and that would be their receiver. And they actually ended up getting probably the better receiver who's a better route runner and is just a better overall player with Jerry Jeudy. Jerry Jeudy is in my top 5 players within this draft period, just like Javon Kinlaw with the last pick. And honestly, Denver is getting a great talent and another target for Drew Lock to have. You have Courtland Sutton on one side. Now you have a guy like a Jerry Jeudy. This was, to me, probably the best pick in this draft in terms of value and in terms of the player that they're going to be getting because they may be getting a future Pro Bowler when we're talking about a guy like Jerry Jeudy. Now with the next pick, the Atlanta Falcons select A.J. Terrell. Surprising pick. A.J. Terrell is a guy that I wouldn't have thought would have gotten drafted that high in the draft. Honestly, I thought that he was probably a later round guy, but he is still a solid cornerback. It's a little bit weird though, because the Atlanta Falcons again choose another Clemson player. This is something that we've seen over and over again. Grady Jarrett, Vic Beasley, if I can name just at least two guys, but they constantly usually draft a lot of Clemson guys, and maybe that's just their thing, but they decided to choose A.J. Terrell. I thought that maybe there could have been another corner that was better than A.J. Terrell, but maybe they see something that I don't see. I think I'm not too big on them choosing A.J. Terrell, but they do get a player of need, and they were one of the teams that was trying to trade up to get a guy like a C.J. Henderson, and nobody was trying to bite. So they decided to stick where they were and choose a guy that maybe they couldn't trade back and get him, and maybe that was just what they had to do. But this was the guy that they probably target if they couldn't get C.J. Henderson, and so it may turn out to be a good pick, but we'll see. With the next pick, the Dallas Cowboys, with the 17th overall pick, select wide receiver CeeDee Lamb. And this was a surprise. This was one of the biggest surprises. I know a guy like Vach Lombardi, who's another YouTuber. He wanted CeeDee Lamb so bad. And people were telling him there's no way CeeDee Lamb drops to the Dallas Cowboys. Well, guess what? CeeDee Lamb drops to the Dallas Cowboys, and they pull the trigger. They didn't mess it up. They take one of the better receivers in this draft and a guy that's going to give Dak Prescott another weapon. So you have Michael Gallup, you have Amari Cooper, and now you have a guy like CeeDee Lamb who plays at Oklahoma. So it's kind of like a hometown type of thing, him coming to Dallas. He probably was a Dallas fan anyway. Oklahoma, Texas, they're like the same thing anyway. But you're getting a guy that can really come in and become a big playmaker for the Dallas Cowboys. And maybe he's the type of player that can push them over the edge and they can get to the playoffs. And maybe they can go a little bit deeper in the playoffs than what they usually do. Next, a surprise pick. And why I say surprise is the Miami Dolphins select an offensive tackle, but not the offensive tackle I thought. I thought they was going to select Josh Jones from Houston. They decide to select Austin Jackson from USC. I'm not the biggest fan of Austin Jackson, so I would just say this. If I was to give this draft pick a grade, it would be pretty low. It would probably be a D. The reason being is that he's an athletic tackle, but he does not consistently use his athleticism in pass block. He's a willing run blocker, which is pretty solid, but he's not a big-time mauling type of run blocker, which is not that important. But when you're not that great or you're inconsistent in your pass block, being a tremendous run blocker really, really helps out, and he's just not that guy. Maybe Miami sees something in him that I don't, but I would just say this. At least they did address the position of trying to protect their franchise quarterback who they just drafted earlier. So it's a situation where maybe they saw something that I didn't see, and maybe he does become a good player. But I personally do not like this pick because I don't think that he's going to be the guy that they expect him to be. With the next pick, the Las Vegas Raiders, up on the clock again, select someone surprising. So first they select Henry Ruggs. Now they select Damon Arnett, Ohio State corner. Another Ohio State corner. So Ohio State corner goes early in the draft, and now another one goes. Now, this is a guy that people thought he was going to drop in the draft because of character concerns. They didn't know about his attitude and everything like that. But Damon Arnett is one of the better corners within this draft. And actually, I think that his skills is almost on par with a guy like Jeff Okudah, his teammate. The only difference is with him and a lot of the other corners that are in this draft, there's not a lot of turnovers or interceptions. The ball skills are not there to a point where they're creating such big plays. And that's what is the only thing that hinders him. But just overall, tackling, man, zone, press, it doesn't matter. This guy is one of the better corners in this draft. And to be honest with you, picking him 19, I'm not that mad about it because he's still a good player. Now with the 20th pick, the Jacksonville Jaguars, who haven't traded away Yannick Ngakoue, decides to select LSU linebacker or edge rusher Clavon Chason. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of Clavon Chason, but he's a guy that they can possibly give them some pass rush. Now, they already have pass rush with Josh Allen. And like I said, they're going to eventually get rid of Yannick Ngakoue. Eventually, they're going to get rid of him. But overall, I believe that Clavon Chason is a guy that if he doesn't become a great edge rusher, maybe he becomes a good linebacker for him. There's a role for him on that team. And we don't know what he's going to turn out to be. Because of his natural athleticism, he's a guy that could honestly become something that we're not expecting. Maybe he's a Barkevious Mingo type of player who wasn't a great edge rusher but became a good linebacker for like a team like the Patriots. We'll see what happens with this situation. But I will say this, I'm not the biggest fan, so I'm not going to be like, yeah, Clavon Chason, Jacksonville Jaguars. But overall, they wanted to get another pass rusher, and they got one with some people call probably the second best pass rusher after Chase Young. With the next pick, the 21st pick, a team that was talked about possibly trying to trade up or trade down, the Philadelphia Eagles select Jalen Reagor. Jalen Reagor I had as my third best wide receiver in this draft. So for them to get him, I thought he was a first-round pick anyway, and they get a guy that's like Deshaun Jackson, that gives you a deep threat guy, that gives you a player that can make plays within the return game. Then a guy that it doesn't matter. You can throw it to him short and he can take it all the way to the house to the end zone. Or a guy that he can, run his routes and double move and just hit down the field, and there's another big play. This is the type of speed that they needed for this team. And I think that this is actually a really, really good pick for the Philadelphia Eagles. With the 22nd pick, the Minnesota Vikings selected Justin Jefferson from LSU, wide receiver. I'll just say this. I'm not the biggest fan of Justin Jefferson, but I think that what Minnesota wants to do with him could actually work. They're getting a guy that's a solid route runner, that has solid hands, that is used to playing in big games and being a pretty big-time receiver. The only thing that's going to hurt him is that he's been in a slot more times in college than anything. And the Minnesota Vikings like to put Adam Thielen in the slot a lot. But I think that with a guy like a Justin Jefferson, being in the slot, being what they can give him, what Kirk Cousins can give him, what Justin Jefferson gives to the Minnesota Vikings is another guy that can be a potential big-time weapon from what they lost in a guy like a Stephon Diggs. But we'll see. We'll see if he can play on the outside and be an outside receiver. I'm not sure if he can, but we'll see. And we'll see what the Minnesota Vikings tries to do with him. Next, another trade. And that is the Los Angeles Chargers decided to trade up to the New England Patriots pick. New England trades out of the first round. The Chargers gave up a second and a third round pick to go and get Kenneth Murray. Me being a Ravens fan, I was livid. I was absolutely livid. Kenneth Murray was the guy that I wanted the Ravens to target so much, and I was actually calling for the Ravens to trade up. And they didn't do it. They didn't pull the trigger. Maybe this is not the guy that they wanted. Or maybe if he was there at the pick that they had, maybe this was the guy that they were going to get anyway. But they also had a plan. They had a backup plan. But the Los Angeles Chargers, they needed a middle linebacker. They got Joey Bosa. They got the other pass rusher, Melvin Ingram. They got, guys on the defensive line, guys on the back end. They needed to solidify a guy in the middle, and Kenneth Murray is that guy. And I think that this is a solid pick for him. I think that this will work out for him. I honestly thought that Kenneth Murray was a top 10 player, and what they gave up for him, to me, wasn't enough. So they actually got good value in picking a Kenneth Murray. Even though I'm pissed off about this, good job, Chargers. Next, with the 24th overall pick, the New Orleans Saints select center or offensive guard Cesar Ruiz from Michigan. To me, he was the best interior offensive lineman in this draft. Who knows what's going to happen with the New Orleans Saints situation. They selected Eric McCoy from Texas A&M last year, who's a center. So I don't know if Cesar Ruiz will actually play center or if he'll just come in and be a guard. But they get a guy that's going to solidify the offensive line more and help Drew Brees out to try to get the ball to his weapons like Michael Thomas and Alvin Kamara. So I think that this is a good, solid pick. It's surprising because a lot of people thought they would go in a different direction, but I think that they got one of the better players within this draft in Cesar Ruiz. Next, San Francisco 49ers also traded up from the 31 spot, and they decide to select wide receiver Brandon Ayuk from Arizona State. Now, this is weird because I had guys like Denzel Mims and T. Higgins higher than Brandon Ayuk, but maybe San Fran has a plan for Ayuk and maybe he fits their system. I like Ayuk because he's a deep threat type of guy. He has a large wingspan. They talk about that a lot. He's 5'11", but has the wingspan of a 6'5" guy. It's crazy how long his wingspan is. So that helps him with being able to climb the ladder and get passes with stretching his arm out and try to get, catches and being able to be in the back of the end zone to be able to stretch out and get touchdowns and stuff like that. So this is a pick that I didn't expect them to make in terms of the player. I expect them to make in terms of the position, but not the player. But this is something that the San Francisco 49ers, this is who they wanted, this is who they target. I thought they could have stayed at 31 and still got this guy, but maybe they was a little bit panicked, and maybe there was another team that probably could have went after him. But overall, I would just say this is a planned pick. This is Kyle Shanahan. He knows what he's doing with offense, so this is a guy that they definitely target, and he probably fits their system. Next, we're going to talk about the Green Bay Packers, who traded up from 30 to 26 with the Miami Dolphins, and they select quarterback Jordan Love from Utah State. He needs 1 or 2 years to develop. They have Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers, I know you're pissed off. I know you're pissed off because they selected a quarterback. They did the same thing to you that they did to Brett Favre, that you did to Brett Favre. So it's now coming for a circle. Now, rumors is that the organization doesn't like Aaron Rodgers no more. And it's not just because of play on his field. It's the way he treats people. They think he's very arrogant, and they feel as though this is a guy that they don't want in their locker room anymore. Jordan Love is a high-energy, fun-loving guy that they feel as though they can bring into this locker room and can be their new star quarterback. And with his skill set, maybe there's things that he can learn from Aaron Rodgers that can make him into a better quarterback. And people compared him to like a Patrick Mahomes. And if there was another comparison, it would be Aaron Rodgers. So maybe they're getting a younger guy that can be the next Aaron Rodgers. But I would just say this. This was a surprising pick. I thought that they would go, maybe linebacker, or maybe they actually go wide receiver. They decide to take a quarterback. They're probably looking at it in a situation and maybe they can get a receiver in the second or third round or whatever other picks that they have. But I would just say this. This was a planned situation that they were going to target Jordan Love and they were going to get him. And they're going to run Aaron Rodgers out of the building. Next, with the 27th pick, a surprise pick, Seattle Seahawks select Jordan Brooks from Texas Tech. I'm not a big Jordan Brooks fan. And this was a weird pick. But Seattle always makes weird picks. And to be honest with you, I really don't want to talk about it much because every year they always pick a player that nobody expects them to pick or nobody expects to be a first rounder, and they always end up doing this. Usually it doesn't work out, so we'll just go to the next pick, which is the Baltimore Ravens. My team, they select linebacker from LSU, Patrick Queen. I'm not the biggest fan of Patrick Queen, but I do understand why they chose him. The athleticism that he brings, the ability to drop back in coverage, his nice swift hips, his fast feet, he can bend. The only thing that I don't like about Patrick Queen is that I don't think he is as physical as you should be in a 3-4 system. But the thing that the Ravens are starting to do now, you're starting to see a lot more 4-2 situations. So instead of there being just 3 defensive linemen on the ground, there's 4 guys. And that helps keep offensive linemen off of a guy like Patrick Queen, who can sit there and run sideline to sideline and make tackles. So I know I'm not a professional scout, so maybe Eric DeCosta sees something that I don't see. I understand the pick. I don't love the pick, but I'll understand the pick. And there's a chance that he could be a solid player within the Ravens organization. Next, the 29th pick, the Tennessee Titans select Isaiah Wilson, offensive tackle from Georgia. This is a nice pick for him. They lost Jack Conklin within free agency, so now they bring in a guy that's going to be a right tackle. He's kind of raw, but I like his skill set because I believe that he's one of the better run-blocking offensive tackles in this draft, and he's definitely one of the more smoother pass blockers in the draft. Next, the Miami Dolphins with the 30th pick select Noah Igabuneni. I don't know how to say his last name, but I mentioned him in my previous video, cornerback from Auburn, and said that there was a chance that he could sneak into the first round. Well, he snuck into the first round. Miami Dolphins, who traded back from the 26th pick, decided to choose the cornerback from Auburn. And I think that he's going to carve out a role as a slot corner for him because they already went and paid Xavier Howard and they already went and paid Byron Jones. So now they can use a guy that can be a slot corner for them and give them that extra help that they need when they go against teams like the Kansas City Chiefs, who has like 3 or 4 receivers, or even the Baltimore Ravens, who carries a good slot receiver and a nice receiver on the outside that brings speed. So now they're trying to solidify that back end of their defense and make it very formidable. And we're getting to the end of this, the last 2 picks. One is Jeff Gladney, the Minnesota Vikings, who traded back with the San Francisco 49ers, selected Jeff Gladney, cornerback from TCU, solid corner. The one thing that I loved about Jeff Gladney is that no matter what, at TCU, he went against the number 1 receiver no matter what. No matter how tall they were, how big they were, he always stuck to the number 1 receiver. This is a good pick for the Minnesota Vikings, and I think they're going to be getting a good production out of a guy like Jeff Gladney. And with the last pick, the Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs decide to select Clyde Edwards-Helaire, running back LSU. This was big. This was huge for Kansas City. They decide to get a running back who they believe can be their big-time starter all 3 downs. This running back can run routes. He doesn't have the best speed in the world, but he's a pass-catching running back that also got power and also falls forward and also he just makes plays. And that's a big thing for them. And the Chiefs, who another team, they're used to selecting LSU players, so this was nothing new for them. They select a guy that I know that Andy Reid has a plan for him. And for the Kansas City Chiefs and for a guy like Patrick Mahomes, this can be a really, really good pick for him. Anyway, that was the last pick in the draft. If you want to see more than me, please hit that subscribe button. Please hit that notification bell. Once again, this is your boy, Draft Raw. Goodbye.
Tuning into the show In the Clutch. You can find us on YouTube at Giraffe Raw. Please sign in and subscribe. Also on Uncut Sports on Facebook. You can also catch us at Ravens Nation as well. And Giraffe Raw, what's that page you subscribe to?
Please subscribe to TV Free Baltimore. You can find them on Facebook, Twitter, and of course, YouTube. And if you want to see more of me, you can subscribe to Draft Raw Authentic on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter.
And the opening song is called Bring the Pain. That's by the artist Renard, streaming on all major platforms, specifically Spotify. We'll see you next week. Thanks for tuning in.